Caroline Polachek is a pop singer who's been around for quite some time now. Her Chairlift days are long behind her, but that work that she put out with Chairlift was really, really good. I think Moth is a fantastic album, and their first album was really good as well. Some great pop singles in those albums, and she has now seen fit to go solo, and it's working really well for her because Pang was an album that got a lot of critical acclaim, some fantastic songs featured on there, and her transitioning into this solo capacity has just seen a lot of success for her and has worked ridiculously well with her second album now, Desire I Want to Turn Into, which I would say is getting even more love than the first one. So that is so good to see for her. She's just one of those artists that's destined to have a hit, and she hasn't had one yet, and I'm not quite sure why. I don't quite get it. I don't quite get how the charts work sometimes, but I could hear like 3 or 4 songs at least from this album, maybe even more, that I could easily see making into the charts if we were in a just world and a just society. Even when you're not just looking at her own singles, when she's on features, she's putting out fantastic music as well. Seriously, she's on a hot streak at the moment for me. For like the last 4 years, I've had at least one song with her on it or by her that's been on my year-end list by the end of the year, because she is just so good at this music thing. It's too good, and it's ridiculous how good she is. And lots of these singles for this album were already released prior to the album. It hadn't even been announced what the album was going to be, and there were already like 3 songs out from this album, and I listened to all of them. They're all fantastic, and it was really exciting to see where she was going to go with the music. And it was just one of those releases where I was like, this is destined to be one of the best of the year. Like, even before I've heard the whole thing, I just know this is going to be great. It was kind of similar to what Breakance did. You know, he kept dropping singles. He didn't really say what they were for. There was no album announcement for absolutely ages, but there were so many songs that I'd heard, and I was like, this album, when it eventually comes, is going to be ridiculously good. There's just no way it can't be. And sometimes your expectations are just met, because Caroline Polachek here has put out a fantastic album. This is so good. Welcome to My Island kicks things off so bloody well. The kind of robotic, stiff vocals on the verses sound great, something you expect from Charlie XCX, honestly. But then, when it bursts into the chorus, her vocals are astonishing at this point. I don't know how she reaches the levels of heavenly sounds that she does. It's insane, but she sounds so beautiful, and it's crazy, and it just works so well. And the fact that the glitchy verses match this kind of chorus shouldn't work really, but it just so works. I like the idea of her saying, you know, desire I want to turn into you, in such a passionate way. It's almost like she's letting go of absolutely everything and just wanting to become something that she's not. It's a really cool idea, and it's sung so well. And this is the thing. For a long time now, I've been saying that Caroline is the best pop vocalist in the game, and I still think with songs like this, you can totally see why that she is getting that kind of accolade. I truly believe it. I think there's a lot of great singers that could be in the conversation. You could have Rosalia, you could have FK Twigs. I mean, you could easily mention, you know, some of the more mainstream names like Ariana Grande as well, who's a great vocalist. But I think not having Caroline in this conversation would be a huge crime. Pang had a huge amount of Imogen Heap influence, and I was the first to say it when that album came out. And I think it's quite obvious that Caroline is very inspired by Imogen Heap when you hear tracks like Pretty Impossible. Everything from the way it starts with the da-da-da-da little thing that she has going on, to that kind of electronic instrumental that you would definitely hear on an Imogen Heap album. And it's not to discredit Caroline and say she's a copycat or anything like that, but I think she'd probably be the first to tell you that she adores Imogen's music, because the influence is so clear, and it sounds great as well. It's so pretty sounding as well. And then from there, you just get this hot streak of tracks, because right after this, you get Bunny is a Rider, which is like nearly 2 years old now, but really doesn't sound out of place on this album. It's probably the poppiest track on the whole thing, unless you would count that as Sunset, which is immediately after, which you could argue is the poppiest track on the whole thing as well. But this track, Sunset, is so good. The Spanish guitars coming through. Where did she come up with this, man? It sounds so stunning. And the vocals where she's like, oh, it sounds so good. It is pristine pristine. Everything about this album is just so clean and pristine, and the attention to detail and the production, the mixing, everything is in its right place. And this track epitomizes that. While we're on the topic of the singles, we may as well mention Billions next, which again has been out for quite a while now. A really good closing track, although I think you could honestly have Smoke as a closer and that would work just as well. But even still, the way this album is sequenced, I'm not going to question it because it's sequenced very well. But yeah, Billions is an absolute unusual sounding track. The Danny L. Hall production is so glitchy and disjointed and strange. It really suits Caroline's voice, so we've heard her over this kind of thing before when she was on the Flume track, Sirens. Like any type of like weird experimenting that can go on with the production, and somehow Caroline's voice can always just fit over it really well. The children's choir that comes through as well towards the end is just really, really nice and adds a great touch to it. This is what I mean, there's just so much versatility in one album here that Caroline is pulling off at every turn. Like there's nothing that feels out of place because she's just nailing every single part of the album. This song sounds like nothing really like anything else in the album, but yet it fits and Caroline nails it. That is an incredible talent to have. Another reason why I put her up at the top of the list when it comes to vocalists right now in pop music, because I don't think there's many other singers out there that could do this kind of thing. I mean, think of all the great singers at the moment that are in the charts or whatever. Could they do Billions, and then could they do Sunset, and then could they do Bunny is a Rider, and then could they do Welcome to My Island? Like, could they do all of those? Probably not. They might be able to do one, but not all of them. And then you've got the freaking two-step breakbeat track, I Believe. If there wasn't already enough strange little tidbits on this album, you get this one, and somehow again she's just throwing this down and it sounds great. And I always like this kind of production. I think it sounds really good when a good singer is singing over it. Reminds me of like some early 2000s type stuff, which I think really suits her as well. And then the atmospheric drum and bass tones of Fly to You, which has Grimes and Dido on it. What a weird pairing that is. I don't quite understand where that collaboration came from. I do feel like they both feel quite like side characters, honestly. I don't necessarily feel like they add a great deal to the track. You know, if you were Caroline being a feature on a song, you know, she'd steal the show, but Caroline having other features doesn't quite work like that. It's like Caroline needs someone as good as Caroline to be a feature to make the song better, really. I can't not mention Blood and Butter though. I think this is an absolutely fantastic track, an amazing down-tempo feel to it that I'd expect something from like the late 90s, from sort of like that era of chill, down-tempo type music. Sounds really good. And then for some reason, some bagpipes pop up out of absolutely nowhere. There's even like a River Thames reference on this album. Is she secretly British? I don't think she's British, but maybe she is. But those bagpipes, man, what an inclusion. Seriously, so good. And yeah, lots of details like this across the album that just make the tracks pop in a great way. The only two tracks I'd say that don't quite have it for me are Crude Drawing of an Angel, that's one of them, and Hope Drunk Ever Asking, which are two tracks that are lovely. They sound really good and it's Caroline's voice just taking a shine. But in terms of the production, there's not as much detail, there's not as much layers being added on top of it that I think could have just made the songs sound a bit better. You know, something like Butterfly Net, which has like that really sort of like orchestral feel with the instrumental lifting up. It sounds really beautiful. These two tracks are more muted. They're not quite as stand out in the track list full of so many amazing songs. They still sound good though, but I would have just liked a bit more coming out of the production on those ones. But overall, this is great. This is so great. I think you knew this anyway. I think most people were expecting this to be great. And yeah, it's just delivered on all fronts. There's versatility, there's great writing across the album, there's choruses that are super memorable, there's amazing singing across the whole thing. It's just a really good album and easily going to be in the conversation for like best pop album of the year by the end of the year for sure. It's an 8 out of 10 from me. I think an easy 8 for sure. Caroline is one of the best at the moment around, and it's so good to have been given this album finally after quite a long wait. And it's delivered on all fronts. So yeah, thank you for watching this review. Hopefully you agree. Let me know your thoughts in the comments as well. If you disagree, always love to see what people think. Tell me more about your day. and how you're feeling. That would be nice. Subscribe, check out my Patreon. Have a good day. Goodbye.